What is going on, everybody? Welcome back. Let's turn that down just a little bit. All right, now, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is Dog Talk with your host, Holden. Glad to have you guys here. Hope everybody is doing good today. Show's coming to you a little bit later than it normally does. I've had a lot going on this week, but getting things taken care of nonetheless, and we are back with you. Glad to get things up and rolling. Trying out a new camera. We're going to see how this thing works. You guys let me know. Obviously, we're back up and running on YouTube, so if you guys could just leave a comment on there. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel there on YouTube. If you're listening on podcast, as usual, you can click that link that's in the description. It will take you to everything you need to know. Make sure you guys, if you want to, follow us on Twitter at DogTalk20. Also on Instagram as well. Again, that link tree that is in the description will take you to anything and everything that we have, minus some of the smaller podcast platforms. But it'll take you straight to iHeartRadio. It'll take you straight to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of those. Make sure you guys leave a 5-star review wherever you guys listen. And make sure you guys are subscribing to the show as well. Also, if you want to support the show, that link's in there as well. Let's go ahead and get into what we've got. Not a lot to get into today. We're going to talk probably more about some of the other games going on around the country, more than we really will about this Georgia-Samford game. Not because we don't want to talk about Samford, but there's not a lot to break down in this game. This game should be, I don't want to discredit any kind of a team, but this game should be a fairly easy game for Georgia. So we'll break it down a little bit. A couple of keys to the game, not a lot to dive into. Looked really good against Oregon, so if you look like that in this game, it can be a pretty ugly one. But we're going to talk a little bit about college football playoff expansion talk right off the top, and then we'll jump into the score predictions, some Twitter polls that we ran, as well as, again, just looking at some of the other games around the country before we get to the picks at the end as well. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So this is what we got. We're going to start things off talking about some of this expansion conversation that is going on. And that is, obviously, this broke. We talked slightly about it last week, but it was NCAA has decided to move forward to a 12-game playoff. Like I said last week, I'm a little surprised that it went to 12 instead of it maybe starting off at like 8. That's kind of where I figured this thing would be. Is let's start it at 8. Let's double it. Go from 4 to 8 instead of tripling and going from 4 to 12, because it just feels like a lot. And I don't know. I've seen some of how it's structured, where the top 4 teams are not playing until that normal position where the top 4 teams would play anyways, but they're playing other opponents. So there is still the potential for those top 4 teams in the country to play an extra game in the playoff, meaning those 4 coming together to play other people. If those 4 win, then it's those 4 playing each other before you finally get to that final game. So there's just extra rounds to it. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. We've already seen a little bit of what could happen if that happens. Again, we've got to see what happens at the end of the season, not the start of the season, to base all of that on. So there's still a lot to come. There's still more information to come out of this. Does this force, and I would assume, but does this force at that point for the SEC to move to a 9-team or a 9-game schedule of SEC, and does that stop the schedule? Does Georgia stop these games against the Samford, stop these smaller games, Utah State and things of that nature? Does it stop those games? Do those smaller schools suffer from that because the big schools now, to prepare for this, are only going to play a conference schedule, and they're going to stop those, maybe playing 10 games a season, to where they do have maybe an out-of-conference or a non-conference game with another opponent before getting to that playoff situation. Some of this is not going to matter for all teams. Some teams are going to want to have 12 games to be bowl eligible in some situations. I don't know. There's a lot that's going to have to be broken down in this. I would assume by the end, again, you're going to have Texas and Oklahoma moving to the SEC. I would assume by then we're going to move to a 9-game SEC schedule, and maybe that's all that the SEC plays, in hopes that allows for SEC teams to be in that playoff run. And right now, there's a strong possibility that you could end up with 3 SEC teams in the Final 4 moving forward to playing for a national championship. So a lot to come. It's going to be interesting to see what happens moving forward with it. I'm not going to harp too much in it. Now let's get to the conversation at hand. That is 4 o'clock this weekend on Saturday, we've got Samford coming to town. The first opening game at Samford Stadium, playing against the Samford Bulldogs for the first time, like I said, being back since the national championship game last year. And obviously that wasn't in Georgia, but since before the national championship game, this is the last time or the first time that Georgia's playing since then, a game at home. So very exciting for fans coming out of that one. The weather does not look very promising for this game tomorrow. It's a 4 o'clock kick. Just prepare yourself for it. Wet, rainy game. I don't know what the line is on it, but if it's me, as far as an early pick on something, take the under. Just because this, to me, seems like it's going to be a very easy one to sit back and say, okay, this is a game we really need to watch and pay attention to, and understand that this is more than likely going to be a game that Georgia will run the ball a lot. And I don't know that. We threw the ball a lot against Oregon, so I could be wrong. It'll be interesting to see what happens with that. So, but that's where we stand in this. This is, will this be a game that Georgia walks away with? That's what most everybody anticipates, and that's no different for us either. Because, again, this is just a very outmatched football team that is coming in here. The keys to this game are fairly simple. The first one is don't sleep on these. Don't sleep on them. You can't, like I said, I'm going to try not to harp on the things that have happened in years past, but you can't sleep on the fact that Samford was in this game against Florida last year, had a lead in this game against Florida last year. Granted, Georgia and Florida were not the same team last year. We saw that, obviously, in the end. Who won the national championship? The Georgia Bulldogs did, so we can move forward with that. But don't sleep on them. Don't come into this game sleepwalking just because it's a rainy game. 4 o'clock, kind of a strange kick. Used to that 3:30 or later or lunchtime kick. Weird to have it at 4 o'clock, but it is what it is. But don't sleep on it. Don't sleep on the fact that these guys are going to come in and they're going to give you their best. There are a lot of ties in this game with Kirby Smart, even Will Muschamp, even Mike Leach, believe it or not. They go back to some of the Samford ties here with the head coach that is at Samford now. So there are some ties. It'll be interesting to see. I don't think that's going to matter very much in this game, but it's still something interesting to think about when the head coach comes to that. A couple of the other keys to this game, and they're not keys as far as the running backs have to run for 400 yards. The quarterbacks, they need to throw for a lot. That's not what I'm going with in this one. I'm keeping it very simple. Don't sleep on Samford. That's the first thing, starting off. Don't sleep on them. Second thing is no injuries. Don't want to have injuries in this game. This is a game that we want to come in, get backups in, get them reps, get them work. That's the third key of this game, is getting backups into this game, getting them experience. Regardless if the team that you're playing is inferior or not, it's the experience. Getting on the field, getting the exposure against another team other than your own, very, very beneficial, very, very helpful for Georgia in this one. But we want to come out of this injury-free. That is a big one. We did very good, and even listening to Kirby's presser coming out of the Oregon game, Georgia did very good coming out of that Oregon game injury-free. Christopher Smith, a little bit of a stinger in the shoulder. Nyland Green, I think maybe. He may be the only other guy who's been battling a hamstring and been limited this week. But for the most part, we did very good coming out of that first week, and the same needs to happen coming out of Samford before we prepare for South Carolina next weekend. So those are the keys to the game. Again, very simple, very easy. I don't have a lot to break down in this game. I wish I did. I wish I could talk to you for 45 minutes about a game right here and tell you exactly what's going to happen. But all I can tell you is I think this is a very good opportunity to get backups in, get them exposure, get them experience, get them in the game, see what they do. See what they do. Again, the weather, I don't think it's going to be the most fun in this game for anybody to get to play in, much less have to watch. But Kirby has made the call for fans to be there and be loud and affect them. That helps with the recruits. Obviously, you're going to have recruits and things of that nature in there. But I want to see what some of these backups can do, and I think that's a very helpful thing. We're going to get to some Twitter polls at the end and kind of what you guys also think on a couple of those situations as well pertaining to the quarterback that I asked you guys to put up. In this one, a score prediction. I put it up for you guys on Twitter. I put it up 59-0. Again, this number kind of feels a little high for Georgia at least because of the potential for it being a very wet game. We know good and well that when it's raining in any game, most games are not that high scoring. And if they are, it's just turned into a sloppy mess out there and everybody's just going back and forth. Don't anticipate that one happening. Really, I could realistically kind of back off and say this could be a 42-3 or 42-6 kind of game. I do think this is Georgia's first opportunity to have a 0 in that column and have a shutout. And it's a good opportunity for that. But it would not surprise me if Samford did find the scoreboard on this one, whether it's field goals, whether it is a touchdown in this game. We will see. But regardless, my pick, and I'm going to stick to it, even though I've seen what this may look like in the end, 59-0 Georgia. Now, let's move into a couple of the Twitter polls that I did put up for you guys after that with the pick and everything coming into it. And there's also another thing that I also put up that I do want to discuss a little bit. Got one on here, 61-3. I want to reply for a score. That's at Dawg for Life 67. And then Patriot on Twitter as well. If we get the same Samford they played Florida last year, I'd say they score at least a field goal and maybe a touchdown late in the game. Again, that's kind of the way I feel on this one. Could that happen? Maybe, maybe not. I'm not sure. One other thing that I do want to say, the AP poll came out. I should have mentioned this off the top, but again, when some of this stuff drops and I have the later episode in the week, it's very easy to forget about it. Like I said, it's been kind of a long week, but in the end, Georgia does end up in that number 2 spot. Somewhat controversial for some people. I put this on Twitter because I did want to see how are we feeling about this. Quite a few guys did reach out and say your feelings on this. I didn't put this up in a sense of how do I feel. It's asking how you guys feel and allowed you the opportunity. And it's like I told you guys last week. I don't care where Georgia ranks. It does not matter today. It will not matter until the end of the season. That's when Georgia needs to be ranked high. That's when Georgia needs to be in that top 4 when it comes SEC championship, when it comes moving beyond that. That's where you want to be ranked in your higher positions. Now, you also don't want to be ranked 10th when there's only a week left in the season. You don't want that. That's a little bit different. So it is kind of we're fine. We're at 2. We're right where we need to be. Is Georgia the number 1 team in the nation right now? I believe they are, but it does not matter. It doesn't matter if you're ranked 2nd, 3rd, 1st, or 4th right now, 5th, 6th even, because Georgia will continue to win and will continue to move up in those ranks. So I do agree with all of you who say it doesn't matter right now. It'll matter later. Let me just go ahead and put that out there now before I get everybody chirping back at me. So getting to the polls from this past week. The first of which, how many touchdowns does Carson Beck throw versus Samford? 33% of you guys said 0 or 1, and then 67% of you guys say 2+. So you guys are thinking that he's going to be throwing for 2 to 3, maybe even 4, even 5 touchdowns in this one. One funny reply that I did actually get in here is Larry Brown Jr. putting up the gif with the guy, putting up 3. I don't know if you guys can see that. 3. That's funny. And if he does, hey, I give you all the credit. One other guy on here, Bear Dawgs, 0 because I think Kirby tries to run out the clock and get out injury free. Like I said off the top, hoping that that's what happens. We definitely want to get in this game and get out of this game injury free regardless. But I do see the very good opportunity that we see more than just a Carson Beck in this game. And this is why I also asked this next one on the poll. Do we see Brock Vandegrift and Gunnar Stockton Saturday? Not one or the other, but I wanted to see if you guys thought we might see one or actually both in this game. 85% of you go with yes and 15% go with no. I think there's a very strong possibility of that. I think there's a very strong possibility first quarter. You would love to see it a quarter breakup. Give Stetson a quarter, give Carson a quarter, give Brock a quarter, and then give Gunnar a quarter. That's not going to happen. More than likely what you're going to see in this game is Stetson's going to play most of the first half, if not all, because he still has to have those reps as well against another team other than his own. Then I think you're going to see a hefty dose of Carson Beck, and then I think is when we see a little bit of Brock Vandegrift and a little bit of Gunnar Stockton there in the fourth quarter. And most of that, they're not going to be throwing the ball. They may a little bit. I'll be very surprised if it's a rainy game and Georgia is up big. I'll be surprised if we do the same thing we did against Oregon where Todd Monken stuck to the air game. Proud of him for doing that, by the way. I was very excited to see that we didn't give up and just not give up, but that we just started to run the ball. Like I said off the top of the season, nobody has to agree with me. We've got a long way to go to see if this is a true thing. Not that I'm saying Stetson Bennett is the next Joe Burrow, but there is the possibility that Georgia is trying to open up the air game as we move forward and scores a lot more in these games. And I hope that happens, but we've got a lot to go before we figure that out. Let's jump into some of the other big games around the country before I get to the picks of the week. The biggest one I think on the weekend that everybody's kind of looking forward to on that 12 o'clock slate is the Alabama-Texas game. Alabama's a 20.5 point favorite in this one. 64.5 is the over/under. 77 and cloudy is the weather. You guys don't care about that one. I have two feelings about this. One is I feel like Texas could come in here and just absolutely get steamrolled at home against Alabama. I do see that is a very strong possibility. I'm not saying that it happens, but I do think that is possible. But I also see this being a potential wake up and understanding that last year, and I'll say this one more time and then I'll quit. Last year, Alabama had a lot of things to figure out. They started the season against a Utah State that you're supposed to beat 55-0, just like Georgia is supposed to beat Samford 55-0. These games you're supposed to win like that, understandable. But that's the way they open. They also did that last year in the games they needed to. It was the games that they needed to put away that that Alabama did not. That's what I want to see. Is this the opportunity for Alabama to come in and show the reason that Texas isn't ranked and the reason they put this line at where they did? Very well possible. Or is this the game where Alabama steps back and go, okay, we do actually have a lot more that we need to work on than we realized, and it pertains back to last season when multiple games that they got in. By the way, with those two wide receivers who, if they'd have won the national championship, with those guys, they still were in games that they should not have been in anymore. And in normal cases, normal years, Alabama would have taken care of business and not been in these games. But they were much, much closer games last season than they have had in years previous. So this is the game. This is the first test of the season. Will Alabama start to have some of those glimmers of last year where we wonder, are they going to be able to put teams away or not? Or is this going to be the opportunity for Texas to show up? Or, again, is this the opportunity that Alabama walks away with it and we go, okay, Texas is not back, and Alabama so far looks to be the team that is going to be competing again for SEC championship as well as national championship. On that 12 o'clock slate as well on ESPN, another good game that I think is lining up here, South Carolina and Arkansas. Again, I have high hopes for Arkansas. I think Arkansas is still a really good football team. I expect them to be very good in the SEC West. Like I said off the top of the season, you don't have to believe me, but I think Arkansas could be top 2, top 3 in the SEC West. And I know some people don't believe that, but that's just truly how I feel. I think they're that good of a football team. They looked pretty good last week, and let's see how they look this week at home again. They do get Spencer Rattler in South Carolina coming to them. Arkansas a 9-point favorite. Over on them, that was 55. Another good one at 12 o'clock, and this is one of the picks that I'm going to make that may be a little bit of a shocker. You got 23 Wake Forest coming into Vandy. Vandy has looked very good off the start of the season. The quarterback there for Vandy, very fast, elusive, has done a very good job to put Vandy at 2-0. Technically, at this point, they are top of the SEC East as well as top of the SEC at a 2-0 ranking. But Wake Forest coming to them. They do get quarterback Sam Hartman, I think is his last name, coming back in. Forgive me for that if it's not correct. So they are a 13-point favorite. I think they came into this game like a 6-point favorite, and with the news of him coming back in, that has just continued to multiply. Over under 65, that's an interesting number, especially considering that it's Vandy, and that line is 13 for Wake. But I'll be surprised. I'll really be surprised in this one, and I think you guys will too, regardless of if they're getting the quarterback not back for Wake Forest. I don't think that matters as much as this one. Let's see if Vandy can keep this thing rolling. I've got Vandy predicted on the start of the season, and you don't have to agree with me. I can understand why you wouldn't. But Vandy starting the season, I actually do have them as a loss in my preseason pick to this, starting the season 3-1, and then finishing 3-2 before the bye after Alabama there, because that's just a big ask. But I think this is a good opportunity for Vandy to maybe mix some stuff up. We'll get to some picks coming up. Moving on to a couple of the other big games. This is one I don't want you to sleep on at 3:30 ESPN2. App State traveling to Texas A&M. App State lost the first game of the season last week, but they looked good. They look very good. So there's a lot that they have to continue to work towards. A&M is a 19-point favorite at home. Again, this one at 3:30. Over on that's 54. A&M is 1-0, and they are also the 6th team in the country. Big game, big matchup from last season to kind of redeem yourself. Number 24, Tennessee traveling to 17, Pitt. Tennessee a 6-point favorite coming into this one, 3:30 ABC. Keep an eye on that one. That was a really good one there at 3:30. Obviously, the Dogs will be kicking off 30 minutes after that on SEC Network. Then we slide on down to another big game, which has a lot of deciding factor for the top two in the SEC East, in my opinion, and that is number 20 Kentucky traveling to number 12 Florida. Florida a 6-point favorite at the house on this one. I don't think Kentucky has won in Gainesville in a very long time. The over-under is only 51.5. This is prime time, 7 p.m. on ESPN. Very good game to watch right here. This, again, I think is going to determine a lot of who finishes second and who finishes down the line in the SEC East this year. Now, preseason, looking back at the picks that I made on this, I have Tennessee at second, Kentucky at third, and Florida at fourth. Obviously, after this huge win that Florida had against Utah, they didn't think Utah was as good, but they thought Florida was good enough to jump all the way up to that number 12 spot, well above everybody else that they had already been ranked below before that game. So let's see what happens with this. Let's see, is Florida truly that? They are at home again, which is a good thing for them, or is Kentucky going to show the reason that I think they're going to end up being third, possibly second, depending on how things go with Tennessee moving forward. Jump down to USC Samford, that at 7:30 on ABC. USC is an 8.5-point favorite. This is a good test to see just how well USC looks. They are 10th team in the country, so we're going to see. And then rounding out the night, way late into the night, 10:15 on ESPN, top 25 matchup, number 9 Baylor at number 21 BYU. And BYU at home is a 2.5-point favorite over the number 9 Baylor. Baylor Bears? The Bears? Yeah, I think they're the Bears. Anyway, all right, getting to the picks. I don't have the graphic put together for you guys just yet. It'll show up on Instagram. It'll show up on Twitter when time comes. I got Georgia beating Samford. It's the easy pick every single week. I'm going to pick the Georgia game regardless of who we're playing. I'm just not going to pick a line on it when it's a game like this. Then I have South Carolina at Arkansas. Give me Arkansas. Give me Arkansas with the points to -9 there. Wake at Vandy. This is the one that I'm going to take. Give me Vandy plus 13 in this one. I think Vanderbilt's going to keep this one closer than you guys think. Kentucky at Florida. Give me Kentucky with the win plus 6 in this game. Plus 6. I like Kentucky beating Florida on the road for the first time in Gainesville in a long time. And we'll see. We'll see how things shake out with that. That's pretty much it. Again, short, sweet, and simple is all there. That's really the only way to put it for this episode. But there's not a lot of breakdown when it comes down to the game for Georgia this week. I do look forward to checking in with you guys after we do come back from that this Samford game on Saturday, and at least then, we can talk about some of that. And in the end, I appreciate you guys listening. Make sure you guys follow us on Twitter at DogTalk20, and we'll check in with you after the Samford game. Go Dogs.